When your grandmother was pregnant with your mother, the egg that formed you was already in your mother. So if your grandmother experienced some sort of trauma or had anxiety or something happened to dysregulate her nervous system, that was passed down to your mother and then passed down to you. So it's generational.
Welcome to the Kindness Podcast. I'm Nicole Phillips. Today's guest is Robyn Graham, and this conversation is for anyone who's ever held it all together on the outside and then just kind of quietly running on just pressure underneath. We're going to talk about anxiety. Robyn is an anxiety breakthrough strategist. She's a former pharmacist, a certified neuroscience coach, the host of The Robyn Graham Show, and the author of You, Me, and Anxiety. Robyn, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm happy to be here with you.
So our big question, our overarching question today is going to be, what does kindness look like when you stop letting anxiety run the show? But I think before we even talk about that, we have to talk about what is anxiety.
Oh, I love this question and the opportunity to explain it, because I think with the advent of social media being so prevalent and everything, there are a lot of misconceptions and there's more awareness, but oftentimes that awareness is leading to excuses of behavior versus truly understanding what anxiety is. So anxiety is an abnormal sense or irrational sense of fear or apprehension. It could be around an event, a circumstance, day-to-day life, relationships. Myriad things can really bubble up as anxiety. And when we think of it from a clinical perspective, which we're not going into that today because it's way complex, but there's many layers to anxiety. But basically, it can be accompanied by physical signs and symptoms. So you take this irrational, abnormal sense of fear or apprehension, and then you build in a physical sign or symptom. And so it can become physically debilitating as well as emotionally.
I guess I didn't think to put those two together. And also, I mean, I'm 51 years old. When I was growing up, we didn't talk about anxiety, right? It's like it didn't exist.
Mm-mm.
But it did exist, right?
It did exist. And, I like to use the example of if you had a parent who was overreactive, maybe something small happened, like a glass of spilt milk, but all chaos ensued because someone overreacted and someone was yelled at, screamed at, punished because of that tiny little thing that happened that seems very insequential, basically, but yet someone perceived it as that. A lot of times with anxiety, that's one of those signs or symptoms is overreacting. So our nervous system is not regulated, and so we think, because we don't feel safe, that we're not safe, and we overreact to then try to make ourselves safe. But at the end of the day, it does not help, and it ends up hurting relationships.
So where does it come from?
That's a great question. And again, people think this is a character flaw or a personality flaw. What it actually is biological. There are epigenetics that play an impact on anxiety, and then there are genetics. There's over 100 genes that have been isolated related to anxiety. So it's not something that you just happen to develop. It can be, and environmental factors play a huge role, a significant role. But epigenetics, if you think of when your grandmother was pregnant with your mother, the egg that formed you was already in your mother. So if your grandmother experienced some sort of trauma or had anxiety or something happened to dysregulate her nervous system, that was passed down to your mother and then passed down to you. So it's generational, and it's not something that is just developed arbitrarily. Chances are it's interwoven into who we are, but then sometimes people can just navigate it, right? It's not severe, and they have had other ways of co-regulation, so their nervous system is healthy, their nervous system is regulated, and so the anxiety doesn't manifest into significant signs and symptoms. Where for other people, all these layers keep compounding and it can become a real challenge, especially if the nervous system has never been co-regulated. Think of your mother at birth, and you're a mom, I'm a mom, that nurturing that we gave our children, the soothing we gave them. If we were regulated, our children learn to regulate their nervous system. If we're not regulated, our children don't learn that technique to regulate themselves. And so the nervous system can be completely out of whack.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, then even if you had this egg that was passed down generation to generation of anxiety, the way that we treat each other can kind of re-stabilize? Or is that not what you're saying?
No, I am saying that. Like if you have a mother that is, calm, cool, and collected, her nervous system is regulated when you're young. And as you're growing up, our nervous systems aren't completely developed for many, many years. And we know now because of neuroplasticity that the brain never really fully develops. We have the ability to change those neural pathways in our brain always. So if your parent is, let's just air quotes for lack of a better word, use the word stable, right? And her parenting is stable, or your father's parenting is stable, you're going to learn how to manage situations, manage your nervous system, manage your emotions. But unfortunately, with anxiety, if you have a parent who is emotionally not accessible, or they have anxiety or depression and their nervous system is not regulated, you don't have an example of how to regulate yourself. And so you learn to respond with behaviors versus regulation. So we think of perfectionism, control, overreacting, defensiveness. We've all had those conversations where we ask a question and somebody's very defensive. They've got their guard up, right? What it is our nervous system doesn't feel safe. And when our nervous system doesn't feel safe, it's going to find ways to keep us safe, ways to protect us. And with anxiety, people are more in the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response than they are able to access their prefrontal cortex, which is what it allows us to make good, healthy, emotionally sound executive decisions, right? So there's that fluctuation between, oh my gosh, I'm not safe, I have to figure out how to get myself safe. And that's where people pleasing, control, perfectionism, and all those things come into play.
So let's say, as a human, we run into another human who is defensive. They are tight. They have something going on in their world because of anxiety. How do we, as the human bumping up against that, how do we lead with kindness in that arena?
I love that you said that, because as you were asking the question, I'm like, well, this is where kindness comes in. Because I like to call it the holy pause. Like if we take a second to pause and think to ourselves, okay, this really isn't about me, this is about them. Now, when you have two people with anxiety, it can be more challenging, right? Because those emotions are going to bounce off of each other. But we have to choose to approach a situation. And you may or may not know that this person has anxiety, but if their behaviors indicate that they're not calm, they're reacting instead of responding, and that's what defensiveness is. It's a reaction, not a response. So we can ask ourselves, okay, is this really about me, or is this about them not feeling safe? But recognizing that may be the situation. So it really isn't an attack on you. It's nothing you said or did, but recognizing with kindness, this person has something going on that is causing them to react this way versus, oh, they're attacking me. So it's really being open-minded, right? To say, okay, I could take this one of two ways, but if we take a deep breath, if we pause, we can access our prefrontal cortex and be kind and compassionate and empathetic as we take a step back and allow them to react the way they need to react, but we respond with grace instead of reacting back. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and it feels so much better when for me when I take the holy pause. Like I like to be in control. And when I lose my marbles over somebody else's behavior, I am not in control of them or me or the situation. And I feel like, the most powerful person in the room is the person who can take a deep breath, take a pause, see it maybe from a balcony level view, and then choose that response. So yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. Robyn, you're a former pharmacist. And so I'm going to ask you this question. In 2015, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And part of my 10-year treatment plan after having the mastectomy was to go on a medication. One of the side effects was anxiety. And throughout my life, I can tell you exactly what depression feels like. I can see that cloud rolling in, and I know what that feels like. I never knew what anxiety felt like until I started taking that medication. And then I would wake up with this feeling. And I remember walking out into the kitchen and saying to my kids, and my whole family, I just need you to know my anxiety is through the roof today. Because I felt like I don't know what's going to set me off. Like, nobody spill the milk, right? And so what does a person like that do? Because I'm like, I don't know what I'm dealing with right now, but I am on something that is making me feel a little not okay.
Yeah. And I can so relate to that feeling. Like, and this is where the physical piece comes in, right? So if you are someone who is experiencing anxiety, it's so important to recognize what activates. And maybe you just wake up in the morning and you feel like, oh, everything is like tingling. You're on edge. You feel like at any minute the volcano's going to erupt, right? And it's only going to take a pin drop to cause that reaction to be set off, right?
Yes.
So the first step is awareness, right? And you did the right thing to say, okay, guys, listen, this is nothing against you. This is what's happening in my body right now. And I know it's not right, but I'm not sure how to navigate it. But that's where being able to regulate our nervous system comes into play, because the more, and this is all, related, the nervous system, it's related to the neuroscience and how the brain works, but our mind is separate from our brain. Like the way we are created, our mind is part of our soul. So we think of, the body is the physical piece. The brain is part of the physical piece of our body. Then we have our soul or our spiritual piece but the soul is where the mind is, our emotions are, our free will, and our conscience. So our decision-making capabilities, yes, we have our prefrontal cortex and the physical part of our brain, but we have our mind where our thoughts are formed, where our emotions are formed. And if we aren't aware of what is happening with our mind, those thoughts, those emotions all go over to our brain, and our brain cannot decipher what is true, what is false. Right?
It clocks it all as truth, huh?
It does, but it's not always true, because for someone with anxiety, all of those negative thoughts, the what if thoughts, or the just being on edge where your nervous system is not regulated and you just feel that just incredible tension. And what's happening in that instance is our brain thinks we're not safe. And if our brain thinks we're not safe, it's going to try to get us to safety. So in those circumstances, we have to focus on how can we convince our brain that we're safe. And there's a lot of different ways we can do this. Breathing is one. Prayer is one. That's kind of my go-to. I'm like, Holy Spirit, activate, like, please calm my heart, quiet my mind. That's like on repeat for me. But there's many other ways. Physical activity, going for a walk, getting out in nature, getting sunshine, and allowing the sun, the energy from the sun to trigger our mitochondrial, our energy source in our body, to then say, okay, we need this much cortisol to get our day going, but towards the middle of the day, the end of the day, we need less cortisol. So let's get some evening light so our melatonin goes up, we can sleep better, then all of our hormones are going to be regulated. And those stress hormones like cortisol are going to fuel this feeling of unsafety. or a lack of safety. So another thing you can do is ask yourself, when you're feeling all of that building up inside, am I safe? Do I feel safe? And then just let out a big physiological sigh. Do a jumping jack. Doodle. Do something to get that energy out of your body. And this is why I love journaling so much, because when we journal, it's just like meditation in terms of power. However, we are using those neural pathways in a different way to get whatever that is that's stuck in our brain, we can get it out onto paper. And so those neural pathways start to move towards the positive versus staying stuck in a negative cycle.
So along those lines, what are your thoughts on journaling from this is a personal question. Like, I've got you here, so I'm like, hey, I'm going to get some free advice from Dr. Robyn Graham right now. So I will journal, and sometimes I'll journal and I will say the hard thing to myself, and then I will wrap it in a bow. And I will be like, and then I'll give it its positive lens toward the end. And sometimes I will journal and I'll leave it raw and gross and harsh, and I will just let it be. Like, it doesn't need a solution today. Is one better for our brain than the other?
I'm going to say no, but kind of with a caveat, right?
Okay.
So it depends on what that gook is that you're getting out. So when I talk about journaling, like, I love to take the negative, get it out, get it onto paper, and then write the positive so that I am changing those neural pathways to the positive. I'm helping my mind think more positively, more positive thoughts versus negative. But one of the journaling methods that I love is what I call my 6 C's, where if we have something happening, right, we can catch those thoughts, those emotions, and we can challenge them. And when we challenge them on paper, our brain starts to see, boy, that was so irrational of me. Not in a bad way, but I was believing something that wasn't true, and I didn't have to stay stuck in this negative belief. I could actually flip the switch. So when we catch it, we challenge it, we change it to what is true, more thinking along the lines of, would someone that knows me, loves me, respect me, or that I know, love, and respect be thinking the same thing I'm thinking about me or about this situation? And when we start to challenge that, and then change it, we start to have more control. And when we have more control, we have more confidence. And when we have more confidence, we can be more consistent in our behaviors, our choices, everything. Our relationships improve. Everything changes.
I'm hearing your 6 C's, and also I read about them in You, Me, and Anxiety, which is such a great book, and I have the parent edition. There's also a teen edition because you wrote this primarily for teen girls, but you have in here, you talk about our thoughts create our results and the negativity bias. Those resonated with me. Would you say more about it? Because I feel like it falls along that same line of yes, it's okay to say the harsh thing on paper, and let it be. And also, careful, right? Like, careful how much you let it just overtake your thoughts.
Absolutely. And this is something, and you said it earlier, you said, like, my anxiety is really high today. And one thing I like to emphasize with that is, don't own this, because anxiety does not define you. Anxiety is no different than something like diabetes or cancer. And we may say but when we say that, we're taking ownership of it, and it starts to fuel us. So it's really important to recognize it doesn't define who we are. It doesn't define what we're capable of. And the less we own it, the more likely we are going to be able to break through it.
So a better way for me to say it should have been,
I'm feeling really anxious today.
Okay, versus my anxiety is really high because I'm owning it in that. Okay, yeah, thank you for that.
You're letting it define you.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that was not a criticism, by the way. That's just, I like to point that out. But because of negativity bias, we are 2/3 more likely to think something is negative versus something is positive. So we may say, well, if we say my anxiety and it's a negative feeling, right? We don't like the way this feels, then that kind of makes this connotation that it's a negative thing and we're going to have negative experiences because of it. Versus if we look at it as, okay, so I'm feeling anxious. What can I do with this energy? How can I make this a positive experience or positive interactions versus negative and having things erupt or, relationships crumble? So that's just kind of an example. But our brain, because if you think of our ancestors, right, they didn't have safety on a regular basis. They had to be alert. That I'm talking like way, way, way back, but they didn't have the means of safety that we have today. But our brains are still made the same way they were made back then. So innately, we're going to look at things to try to keep us safe. So we may assume something's going to be negative. And this is literally 75% of the time. The other interesting fact is that 95% of our thoughts from yesterday are going to be the same today. So if we allow ourselves to get stuck in these negative thought cycles or thought patterns, it's going to be on repeat. So we have to be aware of what we're thinking, what we're feeling. And this is an interesting thing too, is that our nervous system is so complex, but our vagus nerve goes, from our brainstem all the way down to like our cervical area, and throughout our body are all these nerves. Well, people always say, oh, it's our mind or our brain is telling us what to think or feel or whatever. But 80% of the communication through our vagus nerve actually goes from the body to the brain. So only 20% is going from the brain to the body. So that means we have to pay close attention to what's happening in our body. So maybe you have experienced anxiety and you have experienced it in a way. For me, since I was a child, it's a stomach pain. I know when I have this certain feeling in my stomach that something has activated anxiety. I don't feel safe, whether it's an upcoming conversation, maybe a speaking engagement, somebody coming to visit, something with my kids, someone's ill, a move, whatever it could be, right? So I have to think, okay, what has activated this? And then I have to take the action to regulate my nervous system and make sure that I understand I'm safe. I don't have to be afraid in this moment. I have the tools and the resources to be able to push through this or not allow the anxiety, the anxious thoughts to take control. But we as humans typically go to the negative first.
Negativity bias. Whoa, I love it. That's super interesting. And I'm hearing you say like, so allow your mind to speak back to your brain in that moment and identify the feeling in the body, what might be causing that, and then to speak into that to your brain so that you're not carrying that thought over to tomorrow and the next day and the next day.
Yeah. And something that I love to say, and I think this is where kindness to self comes into play, because when we're kind to ourselves, we're going to be more kind to others. We're all made to love, right? And when we think about the complexity of the brain, I mean, the whole brain is working all the time. It's not like your amygdala, your fear center, is over here working on its own. No, there's other parts of your brain that are working at the same exact time. But otherwise, none of us would ever survive, right? But in the center of the brain is the hippocampus. And in that hippocampus is a switch. And it's either going to go to the fear center, the limbic system, the amygdala, or the prefrontal cortex, our brilliant center, where we make good decisions. Okay? We can change that switch with gratitude. Yes. We cannot be anxious and grateful at the same exact time. So gratitude is such an incredible gift to be able to give ourselves to, no matter what situation we're in, find something to be grateful for. Because that will allow us to move into our prefrontal cortex and be able to think wisely, make good decisions, access our creativity for problem solving, and then choose better behaviors.
And gratitude and kindness are kind of, they're cousins, right?
Yeah,
they're pretty close friends. And so I often would when I learned it, I learned it through the lens of kindness. And then I learned like gratitude does so many of those same things with releasing these feel good chemicals and and serotonin and things like that. But what I learned with kindness was when you think back on that act of kindness and have the serotonin re-released into your body, you need to imagine it in a way that you feel it, right? That it actually matters. And so uh, when my kids were little, I had them write down like a gratitude journal, and it was like, I love lamp. I love, I'm grateful for couch. I'm, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to actually get to the point, I'm assuming, this is where the question comes, it's not a matter of just looking around and being like, yeah, I'm grateful I have a house. I'm grateful I have friends. I'm grateful. It's stopping and slowing down enough to actually think it so that you can feel those chemicals move through your body. Or where does that switch? What makes that switch go off within the gratitude?
That's a really good question. It's scientifically, I don't know that I can explain it well, like in a short period of time. But when you think about just looking at a situation, and if you can find a positive to be thankful for in that situation, like maybe you got in a car accident, but looking at that situation as, oh my goodness, thank you that I am safe. Thank you that I have a car. Thank you that I have insurance. Thank you I have somebody to come and pick me up, even if it's AAA. Thank you that my car's not totaled. Thank you. There's a million things we can be thankful for. But acknowledging what that is, it just shifts that perspective and helps us see that, okay, this situation may not be ideal, but I'm safe. I'm protected. And at the end of the day, I have someplace to go, someone to help me, someone to love me, and this is not, I realize there are people that may not have someone there for them. So I want to honor that. But there's always something that we can be grateful for.
Right. It's like there's always something we can give, right?
Exactly. And this is where I think kindness really does come into play, because if we can look at our situation, you think about when you go to the grocery store, and sometimes the clerks at the grocery store, the cashiers, they're like old, right? They're like 70 or so. And I look at them and I think, wow, like they still have to work. They didn't get that opportunity to retire. I'm grateful for everything that I have, and I want them to feel good. So smiling at them, asking them how their day is, that shifts our own internal emotions to be more positive. So that gratitude practice can come into play there. Like, I'm so grateful I get to do work that I love, speaking and sharing the knowledge that I know. We all choose these different life paths, and our life paths are going to come out a certain way at the end of the day, all based on what we believe, what we think, how we let our feelings drive our actions and our behaviors.
I see it in when I go to a restaurant because, 99% of the time, if I'm going to eat off of a plate, I have to clean that plate, right? You don't just get to, right? And so I can sit there and I can be grateful for the fact that I didn't have to cook the food, but I get really, really, really grateful when somebody comes and picks up my dish and takes it away magically, because I'm like, wow, like, yep, I'm going to have to be the person who cleans my own dish and other people's dishes. But right now, in this moment, someone is going to serve me and do that for me. And isn't that lovely? Like, that just, it delights me. Maybe more than the food does, right?
Yeah. So you just reminded me of, and I think it's funny that you brought the eating out, the dinner out example, because in your book, you talk about the man that you bought the meal for. How many times do we see something or someone and we judge it? We don't get curious, we judge.
Yeah.
But instead, if we got curious, like, wow, I wonder what happened to them, and we take a second to even smile at them, what if that moment changed the course, the trajectory of their life? So we don't know, because it could have very well been anxiety that led them to have to live on the street.
Right. You don't know what the spiral was. And honestly, I mean, I couldn't even count the ways in which people have saved my life, with in little ways and in big ways, right? It doesn't always look dramatic in the moment, but it's cumulative.
Yes.
When people show up for you again and again and again, not even the same people, but when different people show up for you again and again and again, it's what gives you the strength and the motivation to keep going. And I felt that throughout my entire life. And so thank you for reading my book. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But it's so true. And I think, when you think of being kind despite anxiety or amidst anxiety, however you want to look at it, it's when we take action over that anxiety, when we do intentional work to overcome, we can stop being controlling, we can stop pleasing others, and allow ourselves to take care of ourselves as well, to establish healthy boundaries. And when we stop having to be perfect, we're actually demonstrating kindness, because our entire outlook and behaviors shift so that the people around us can feel that we're consistent, that they can trust us. We can have healthier, better relationships. But when we're stuck in those cycles of anxiety and we have to control everything, we have to please everybody else, when we lack consistency because we're not able to make good decisions and make them on a consecutive basis, we're avoiding, we're overreacting, we're defensive. All of these come into play and they break down our relationships. So one of the kindest things we can do, especially for our families, is just to get the help we need. And it's okay to get curious. What's happening here? You know what? I can't do this by myself. I'm going to ask for help.
Such a good point. Totally agree. Yeah, because I see some people wear themselves totally out in honor of taking care of, like, oh, I want to be kind, right? They will label kindness on it, when really, to me, I'm like, that's not kindness. That's poor boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Stop and buy yourself a sandwich, or go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom. You running yourself ragged for my benefit is not kind. So stop calling it kindness.
Yeah. Well, because what happens then when we're burnt out or tired, we're not going to have positive emotions towards other people,
right,
or ourselves. Like,
right.
It becomes a vicious cycle.
Yes, it does. What have I not asked you about that you want to tell us about?
I would just emphasize, like, this isn't, if you have anxiety, number one, it's not a character flaw. This is biological. There's something happening in your physical and emotional body. And be kind to yourself and to the people around you by just getting the help that you need. And there's no shame, there's no guilt in that help.
Thank you, Dr. Robyn Graham, for this amazing interview. Thank you for your gorgeous book, You, Me, and Anxiety. I'll tell you what, she originally wrote it for teenage girls, and there's a parent edition, but this book is not just for teenage girls. It is for anyone, but it really is a very accessible book, and so I appreciate that. Very, very easy to read and very open. So thank you, Robyn. You can find Robyn at the Robyn Graham on the socials, and the Robyn Graham Show wherever you get your podcasts, and pick up her book, You, Me, and Anxiety. And if this conversation spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, please. Somebody who is holding it all together in their life, maybe could use a little more calm, or just somebody that you're like, hey, I think you might like this. And if you enjoyed this episode, I hope that you will come back again for another conversation about what kindness looks like in real life. Until then, remember, what you look for is what you see.